Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this installment, Jared Harris's team of Oxford students investigate the Quiet Ones in the latest from the rebooted Hammer Horror Studio. Set in 1974, Professor Copeland, played by Jared Harris, teaches classes at Oxford University on the supernatural, theorising that it is merely a manifestation of the mind which could help improve treatment of mental illness. When the university cuts its funding, Copeland goes rogue with the aid of students Chrissy and Harry, played by Erin Richards and Rory Fleck-Byrne, and cameraman Brian, played by Sam Claflin, to record the results of his experiments on the mentally disturbed Jane Harper, played by Olivia Cook, at an isolated house in the country, little realising they're meddling with forces beyond their control. The Quiet Ones claims to be based on the terrifying true experiment, having been inspired by real events, although by the time the ending rolls around, I'm pretty sure no one will believe this actually happened. The inspiration is what's known as the Philip experiment, which was conducted by Canadian researchers in 1972, where they created a poltergeist using intense concentration and inventing a name and backstory. Needless to say, the tale on screen is only tenuously related to that. And I know a lot of horror films claim they're based on real events to give the frights on screen a little bit of authenticity, but I take umbrage with the fact that The Quiet Ones actually fabricates real-life photos in the closing credits for a story that's almost entirely fictional. That's just plain insulting the audience's intelligence. On the plus side, at least the production design for the 70s setting feels authentic and accurate, helped by shooting on location on the Oxford campus. It's clear what The Quiet Ones is trying to be, and that's something akin to The Conjuring, which itself was based on shaky true story foundations, but was highly effective entertainment. Certainly it shares a very similar premise of investigating the paranormal, but that's become an extremely overdone plot in recent years, and I can even name several other examples I reviewed on this show, like Shelter, Red Lights and The Awakening, although at least I can say I've seen it executed far worse, but also much better. Whereas The Conjuring treated the supernatural as fact, and Red Lights and The Awakening came at the subject from an area of skepticism, The Quiet Ones is... actually, I'm not sure what the heck it is. I got the impression while I was watching this there was originally a much slower paced tale, but it seems to have had a serious attack in the editing room to make it faster. And despite its period setting, it seems more aimed at teens, even being curtailed for a PG-13 rating. And you can notice this in the earlier sequences, where it interrupts itself early and often to try and scare the audience and sacrifices mood and tone as a result. It's a throwback, but it incorporates all the worst elements of modern horror movies. And these genre flicks need atmosphere for the suspense to build up in, but The Quiet Ones only infrequently slows down enough for that to happen in its longest sequences, as instead merely content to pound the audience with jump scares. The film's helmed by John Pogue, whose previous directing credit is direct-to-video sequel Quarantine 2 Terminal, having previously worked as a writer on Ghost Ship in the infamous Rollerball remake. With a CV like that, it's little wonder why the storyline is as haphazard as it is, especially given there are two more writers reworking another screenplay by a fourth, and yet never moves in any real direction. The goal of the experiments is for Jane to transfer the demon tormenting her, nicknamed Evie, into a doll that can then be vanquished so she can be cured, but this is so loose and vaguely explained that the seance scenes seem to do whatever they like. The characters don't seem to react very much to the fact that Jane starts physically manifesting signs of demonology, despite the fact this contradicts their goal, and nor do they really discuss it afterwards or change their approach like scientists would. If it was meant to be more psychological, then these CGI tricks completely negate all that, and despite a big jolt lifted straight out of The Haunting in Connecticut, there's a subsequent scene where Brian still tries to convince the others it's all fake. There's no sense of escalation or development, they just patch up whatever fresh wounds Jane has and go into yet another scene of them trying to manifest the entity time and time again, to the point where you feel like you put much of the film in any order and it wouldn't make much difference to its comprehensibility. This is made worse by the fact the movie has exactly one trick. It goes very quiet for 10 seconds before a loud BANG! bang! Even by genre standards, the jump scares in The Quiet Ones are ear-piercingly loud. There are several scenes that maybe last 4 or 5 lines followed by a huge boom, but they never mix it up. So all you're left with is watching the same scene playing out repeatedly and soon grows repetitious and irritating. While the movie could certainly win the medal for the 500 decibel shriek, it's never in any way scary. It's just startling in a graceless and heavy-handed way that's synonymous with PG-13 horror flicks. The film also incorporates another modern element by using a partial found footage approach, where the audience sees the film that Brian is recording through a surprisingly portable camera, intercut with traditional cinematography. The use of POV camera is often for 2 reasons. The first is to make the audience feel like they're actually there, such as when they go up to the attic and take turns literally tripping up over each other. The second is to emphasise the disturbing inhumanity of what's going on, which the camera coldly captures in detail, and it suggests that The Quiet Ones is going to turn its attention onto the motivations of those in control. Sadly, that perspective never truly comes to fruition, and too often the footage that Brian is recording just feels like yet another angle, especially when he places it down so he can participate within. This is just one of numerous threads that are introduced but aren't followed up, so the characters never develop, particularly Chrissy and Harry. Despite this, Jared Harris is great as the sinister professor, and his casting nicely reminds us of the classically trained actors like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, with operatic presences that carried even their lesser material, and I wish the film explored his motivations further rather than having to conceal them for a reveal. Olivia Cooke is also convincing as the wounded subject, especially in her more sympathetic scenes with Sam Claflin's Brian as he becomes increasingly concerned by her well-being, but his own character is too passive because of his time spent behind the camera, and doesn't say very much when he's in front of it. This movie really wastes the opportunity that it should have taken to focus on the psychological and ethical aspects, where even the students become prisoners to their professor's ambition, which would have been so much more interesting and engaging than a generic creep show we got. Instead, the last 10 minutes goes off the rails, as all logic and pretense of truth goes completely out the window, as the big turns are rushed out, and then just to add insult to injury, it finishes on a blatant anachronism. The Quiet Ones is not terrible, nor is it the worst Hammer revival movie, but it is a huge missed opportunity and a lackluster follow-up to The Woman in Black, which had a sense of dread this movie lacks because the script is so poorly structured. Jared Harris helps to elevate the proceedings, but it doesn't choose a path to go down, content to merely allude to all those options while doing the same thing over and over, aiming more at short attention teens with its underdeveloped POV gimmick and deafeningly loud soundtrack, leaving little flavour of the Hammer of old. Horror fans will find nothing here they haven't seen before, and the only lasting impression The Quiet Ones will leave is the ringing sensation of tinnitus. I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.